Hey, welcome to SpaceX Daily, episode 37. It's July 19th, 2026, and I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Let's get into today's SpaceX developments. Infrastructure moves in Texas and Louisiana, plus Falcon's 50th California flight of the year, point to concrete steps toward higher launch cadence, while Starship testing continues. SpaceX stood down from the planned 13th integrated flight test of Starship after an engine-related condition surfaced during the terminal count. The abort came after the vehicle had completed full pre-flight sequencing and remained secured on the pad at the South Texas site. Teams identified the issue in the final seconds before liftoff and immediately began data review. The attempt has been rescheduled for July 20 with the same test objectives, while root cause work on the engine anomaly proceeds. In a separate operation, the same day, a Falcon mission successfully delivered satellites for the Space Development Agency, illustrating ongoing separation between the two programs. SpaceX stood down from Starship's 13th flight test after pre-launch checks at the South Texas site. The vehicle remained on the pad while teams assessed the issue that appeared in the final moments. This keeps the test campaign on a compressed schedule aimed at gathering flight data quickly. The next attempt will again target the same test objectives. Starship Flight 13 ended in an abort after an engine issue surfaced on the pad. The flight test sequence reached the final seconds before the hold was called. Root cause work on the engine anomaly is now underway ahead of the July 20 retry. The last-second abort of Starship Flight 13 occurred after the vehicle had completed extensive pre-flight sequencing. Reports indicate an engine condition triggered the hold at the South Texas launch site under the current test campaign. The outcome is being reviewed against the program's rapid iteration targets. Follow-up data from the July 20 attempt will clarify whether hardware margins align with the planned flight rate. The Starship test flight was aborted at the final moment before liftoff. Teams identified an engine-related condition during the terminal count. The vehicle stayed secured on the pad while data review began. The abort occurred after all prior ground operations had completed successfully. A new target date of July 20 was set following the scrub. One thing worth watching is whether the July 20 retry confirms engine health margins that align with the program's rapid iteration targets. Reports note the vehicle completed extensive pre-flight checks yet still encountered the hold, highlighting the tension between aggressive flight test goals and demonstrated engine-out tolerance ahead of crewed missions. Resolving the root cause and confirming hardware performance on the next attempt will show whether the test campaign can sustain its intended pace. While teams diagnose the engine issue on the pad, longer-term infrastructure work is already underway to remove other cadence bottlenecks. SpaceX is constructing a 13-kilometer pipeline in Texas dedicated to supplying propellant directly to Starbase. The dedicated line will replace truck deliveries and targets higher flight rates by moving fuel through a single, always-ready conduit. The project runs alongside ongoing Gigabay production ramp work and will be watched for operational status ahead of the next integrated flight tests. Observers on X noted the rapid rescheduling to July 20 and discussed how quickly teams can close out the engine anomaly review, while several accounts highlighted the parallel SDA mission success as evidence of operational separation. The same systems logic behind the Texas pipeline also drives plans for a second coastal launch site. A proposal calls for the Louisiana site to serve as the primary Starship launch location starting in 2028. The facility would complement Texas operations and support higher cadence once orbital refueling and booster catch milestones are demonstrated. Shifting primary flights eastward would reduce pressure on the South Texas environmental and regulatory envelope. Construction timelines and FAA licensing remain the next gating items, and community members tracking infrastructure updates pointed to the Louisiana proposal as a long-term complement to Texas operations once permitting advances. While new sites are planned, existing Falcon operations continue to deliver the reuse data Starship will need. SpaceX is preparing its 50th Falcon launch of 2026 from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The mission continues the site's record cadence using reused boosters and fairings. Each California flight adds data on booster life limits and rapid pad recycling. The milestone underscores Falcon 9's role in maintaining launch access while Starship development proceeds. Viewers in the region can track live coverage through standard public streams. Arizona residents can view the upcoming Falcon launch from Vandenberg via public webcasts and select ground spots. The flight adds to the year's California total and demonstrates continued reuse of first-stage hardware. Clear weather windows are required for visual sightings from the state. The event provides another data point on Falcon turnaround intervals between coastal missions. From an engineering standpoint, the 13-kilometer Texas pipeline under construction for Starbase propellant delivery illustrates a classic systems-level trade-off between logistics overhead and launch cadence. Trucking liquid oxygen and methane to the pad consumes driver hours, vehicle cycles, and buffer storage that grows linearly with flight rate. A fixed pipeline collapses that variable cost to the marginal energy of pumping and removes the throughput limit imposed by discrete transport assets and the time required to pressurize and verify each truckload. Once the line is online, the effective idiot index of ground support drops because the same propellant mass moves through a single conduit rather than repeated discrete handoffs. This change directly supports the open question of rapid reuse cadence by shortening the ground turnaround that currently sits between static fire and flight attempts. Next milestones to watch are pressure test results and integration with the existing tank farm controls. The same infrastructure logic applies at the proposed Louisiana site. A dedicated coastal pad removes the need to share South Texas airspace and regulatory windows, allowing independent flight rate growth once the first orbital refueling demonstrations succeed. Shifting primary operations eastward also changes the heat shield recovery geometry and downrange landing zones, which in turn affects booster catch timing and tower arm loading profiles. The engineering decision therefore trades near-term construction cost for long-term parallelism across two geographically separated sites. Listeners following launch infrastructure will see the first measurable effect when Louisiana permitting filings appear, and when the Texas pipeline begins its own pressure test campaign later this year. Falcon operations at Vandenberg continue to supply the data that validates reuse assumptions Starship will later need at scale. Each of the 50 California flights this year recycles the same booster hardware through multiple missions, directly measuring the life limit of engines, tanks, and grid fins under coastal launch conditions. That accumulated flight history reduces uncertainty in the Starship reuse model by providing a real-world baseline for thermal cycling, propellant loading speed, and pad turnaround intervals. The 50th mission therefore functions as both an operational milestone and a calibration point for the larger architecture still under development in Texas. Visual observers in Arizona shared ground spot recommendations for the upcoming Vandenberg flight and confirmed clear weather forecasts for potential sightings. Discussions also covered the 13-kilometer pipeline's potential impact on truck logistics once it enters service at Starbase. On the AI front, OpenAI has promoted former ex-AI engineer Uday Ruddaraju to CTO of Compute, moving a key figure with experience scaling large training clusters into a senior role at a direct competitor. The appointment underscores the tight talent market for high-powered data center architecture and the cross-pollination between xAI's Colossus builds and other frontier labs. Ruddaraju's prior work on xAI infrastructure provides context for how power and networking decisions at one site can influence industry-wide approaches, though no direct SpaceX hardware tie-in is reported in the move. And a quick market note. SPCX is trading at $123.99, down 2.4%. Before we go, watch for pressure test results on the new Texas pipeline and the first Louisiana permitting filings later this year. That's your SpaceX news for today. If the show saves you time, a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify genuinely helps new listeners find it. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow. One more thing. If you liked today's episode, our sister show First Principles Daily is worth a spot in your feed. reasoning from raw materials, not analogy, on the breakthroughs that actually cut cost. It's one of the NARA Network's daily briefings, all free at naranetwork.com. Following the long arcs, story trackers on naranetwork.com follow major programs across episodes: Tesla, SpaceX, AI, space science, and more. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.